Hey everybody, welcome back. We have now reached July of 1940.
Yeah.
We've battled in Dunkirk, we have set up Vichy France, we have really put kind of a halt to the westward invasion of Hitler.
There's nowhere else to go except Britain.
Right.
And so the general staff gets busy working on Operation Sea Lion.
Yes, oh yes,
Trying
what a great
to
name.
invade Britain, but everybody knows without destroying the Royal Navy, any invasion is going to be very short-lived because the Navy will just swim down there and knock your socks off.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, Germany does not have a very large surface fleet, and it's still building the submarine fleet.
Sure.
So the Type 4s are just really getting going, which are the ones that can actually reach, like North America if they want to. But they can get out there in the ocean and really go after convoys.
Right.
Which are already started. I mean, that was an invention of World War I that we don't talk about a lot. But convoy, easier to protect.
And again, the reason for it, as you can imagine, if with anything, you're wanting to protect your main supplies in the middle. Usually troop movements or your resupply ships
Or
oil
well, for
or
Britain,
something
food.
along. Yeah, food for
They
sure.
don't produce enough food on the British Isles to eat.
They're small.
They're
okay?
small and they have they've been heavily industrialized since 1840.
Right.
And so they just don't produce as much food as they need. But then again, that's never been a big thing. They've got friends like Canada, America, Australia, Argentina. I mean, they just got all these people willing to sell them food for cheap.
Sure.
So it works out. But now in the middle of a war, that becomes very...
It's a drastic change.
So Britain is on its heels. It just got back, 190,000 plus 140,000 Frenchmen.
Right.
But now we have to arm them again.
Right.
Because they left all their big equipment. We might have rifles for them, but we don't have, because we're using the same rifle we used in World War I.
Right.
The Lee Enfield.
And but again, we don't have our machine guns. We don't have any real. Do we have anti-aircraft weapons?
Oh yeah, there are some around London, but just not the masses of them. What we'll see towards the end of the war, because they're cheap to build. So
sure.
Allies and Germans both build tons of them.
Okay.
That's where you get the flak that we see that becomes famous.
I hate flak.
Yeah, gives me
a headache.
I got a lot of flak at work. So anyway, I guess one thing I want to mention before we move on.
Yeah.
A good side to the Vichy France thing.
Sure.
It's the one place in France that Jews weren't deported until well late in the war. They were protected.
And that is
the
great
French
thing.
fascist who Pétain led
Yes.
didn't see the whole. They didn't understand the whole Jewish thing, so they were out of that.
Right.
So one bonus of Vichy France. It's
One
not a
of
big
very
bonus,
few,
really,
but yeah.
it's there.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of wanted to mention that because
hey, that's a great point.
But then, so to soften them up, Hermann Goering, here he is again, says that he will beat Britain into submission.
Really?
And really, when you look at the first phase of the war, phase 1 is on the board there, July 10th to August 7th.
Right.
This phase of the war is pretty nasty for the British because Hermann Goering is going after their airfields and their radar installations.
Now, again, little side note: radar is a interwar invention, correct?
Yes. It really started being developed in the 30s.
Okay.
Mainly the British being way up in the front.
Oh, for sure.
Their technical innovation, we don't think of Britain as an innovative country today. But between the wars, they were
on it.
They were snapping
rapid
stuff out.
fire.
Yeah, they were thinking of new ideas all the time. Well, they developed sonar.
Right.
In the first war.
Right.
Tanks.
True.
Which they called tanks because they wanted to hide it from the Germans, so they told them it was water tanks. And the name stuck.
Yeah.
At least
for the most part.
In the West.
Right. But the thing here about this, again, when you are strategically bombing airfields, radar stations, and destroying, of course, your able-bodied men to fight, Goering is pulling on that string for Hitler.
Well, but that first phase of the war, they came very, very close to winning.
I'm sure.
The RAF was in bad shape. It wasn't until like September, that second phase, that the aircraft manufacturing really took off. But by that time, the problem was not aircraft; it was people to fly them.
Right.
You have a guy from World War I with no legs flying an airplane. Because you're literally take anybody. You see that at the beginning of the movie, Pearl Harbor?
Exactly, yes. I was
Is it
just
Ben
about to
Affleck's
talk about
character
that.
is the one that volunteers?
It is Ben Affleck's character who goes over to Europe,
And
goes
serves
to
in
the
the
RAF, and he...
Quite a few Canadians went as
Of
well.
course, and, you know, and it's, well, you're an ally, quote unquote an ally, you know, even though we're not into the war yet. I mean, we're still about what? This is 1940, correct? Or
Yeah,
is
we're
this
still in
40?
1940.
Okay, so it's not still for another almost year or year and a half that the United States officially declares war. And
Lend-Lease is already a thing.
sure,
So we're neutral, just like we were in the first war.
yeah, neutral,
Not really.
right? Neutral with an asterisk.
Yes.
because we
Yeah.
are going to support those who are our allies. We're
Yes,
gonna
the
support
ones we
British.
see, the lines are much clearer
Oh, for
in
sure.
World War II than they are in World War One.
Well, again, in World War I, you didn't know who exactly was the quote-unquote enemy.
The bad guy isn't
Right.
really a bad guy; he's just German.
Right. Okay.
I
Well,
mean,
there are a lot of Germans in America.
Why are the Germans in the war? Because they helped their friends, the Austrians,
yeah,
against the Serbs who killed their prince.
sure.
So you're like, oh, this is a mixed up war.
But now that
This
we
war,
see,
Hitler is a very obvious. In fact, isn't this the year that Charlie Chaplin does his mockery of Hitler with his
Right.
the Dictator movie?
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
Of course, Chaplin already had the mustache.
Yes, but he made that more of the famousness
Yes.
of the Hitler. What was it's the artist's brush
Yeah,
stash, I
something
believe
like
it's called.
that, yeah.
Regardless of it, the fact is that again, the Americans are in there. They're helping with the convoy system. They're bringing food. They're bringing ammunition. They're bringing all of these things over here to the to the United Kingdom, and resupplying.
Right. Now, for the most part, it's on British ships,
Right.
Canadian ships.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
it's not.
we don't put ourselves in there.
Right, we're not at war, and we're not going to go to war, but we'll see that start to shift. We'll talk about that
Huh.
as we get closer to late 41.
Yeah.
But this attack, going after the radar installations and the airfields, really starts wearing just the attrition of losing. You know, yeah, the IRAF was having almost a 3-to-1 kill ratio, I think. But the problem is they're less than a third the size
Right.
of the German Air Force at this time. But the German Air Force is designed for blitzkrieg.
Sure.
It's fairly short to medium range bombers, dive bombers,
Right.
which are very short ranged, and fighters that support them. And this is a long haul for like Stukas. They
Uh-huh.
don't get much past London.
Well, and you think about it. Why are again after the fall of France? They've got the port of Calais.
Mhm.
They've got Dunkirk. They've got Normandy here.
Yeah, sure.
And again, what do you like? Maybe 90 miles or
Well,
so.
like what there is what 30 miles.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Down here it's like 90 to 100 miles.
But still, that's not far.
No, it doesn't seem that far, but you have to get there and back.
Sure. And again, with the blitzkrieg style of fighter, they're not really
Right.
having the fuel capacity.
The Stuka, I don't know, had more than 200 and some miles range.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean, that's there and back. It wasn't there. So,
It's a you drop your bombs and go.
well, yeah. I have an appointment. I have to go home. And the DO-17s, the Ju-88s are all kind of medium range,
Sure.
which allow you to get farther into England, but still not with a large bomb load.
Yeah.
And they're not that great at bombing strategic targets.
Well, and again, they're using night bombing, correct?
For this part, they're going after the RF in the daytime.
Oh, okay.
That's the phase one.
Okay.
They're going all out to destroy the RAF, which of course is a great plan. If you destroy the RAF, then you have air superiority over their island.
Yeah.
You can fly your bombers anywhere you want to
At
because
any time.
the Stuka especially is very slow, very, very vulnerable to fighters.
Sure.
It's slow, it's kind of armored, but not well enough.
Mm-hmm.
Spitfires and Hurricanes probably just,
Eat them for lunch.
they have a little teeth thing. They probably have saliva coming out of the
Yes.
engine
Yes.
when they see a
Like,
Stuka
if they can
or
move
2 or
their
3.
wings,
I mean, they're like, oh my gosh, I can get 3 kills in one day.
yes, if they can move their wings, I'm sure they were, you know,
Yes.
yes.
Anyway. And this goes on for, well, almost a month.
Yeah.
But the problem is, German casualties are high. And of course, when a German plane is shot down, they lose the pilot.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's either a POW or KIA.
Right.
Or he's in the channel.
Right, and there's no way you're getting him back.
Which you're not getting him back, because the British are the ones running the channel.
Right.
So even when they lose pilots off in the channel, they get a lot of them back. So for the British.
Right.
So
not
the British can recycle their pilots.
Sure.
Oh, your plane got shot down, but here's a
darn
new
it.
one.
Yeah, here's a new one. We're churning them
We're
out.
churning them out at a high rate of speed, and we just need you back in the cockpit.
Right.
And again, the stories that come out of the Battle of Britain are just the heroism of the few. When Winston Churchill talks, never so many owed so much to so few.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so true. You got a guy who volunteers. He's a World War I pilot. Comes back, doesn't have any legs. You've got guys who are wounded and go back up. I mean, flying an airplane, especially in this stuff, we don't have the fly-by-wire cool stuff we have today.
No.
When you pull on that stick, you're pulling on the stick. That's why there's very, very few of the modern fighters anyway. We see it more in the Soviet Union, but we do see it some in the United States transferring stuff. Women would have a very hard time because it is a lot of muscle power.
Literally
to
pulling up on that stick.
Yes, when you're pulling on that stick, you are pulling the whole plane because you are literally pulling the ailerons into their new position.
Now, and again, speaking of just the heroism, I mean, we're lucky here in this nation that we don't have invasions.
No, that's
on
not
a constant struggle.
Well,
I mean, think about, even in, I know we're going back way into the history books, but the invasion of Normans into England.
Yes, 1066.
Right, William the Conqueror.
Last successful invasion.
Right. I mean, but the constant struggle of, will we get invaded? Now, I don't think today would be an issue because there's such an alliance. But again, in World War II, Germany was trying to conquer your land.
Yes.
You did whatever you could to fight for your freedoms.
Now, in July, Hitler's right-hand man, guy who was with him in prison, helped him write Mein Kampf, Rudolf Hess, flies into Scotland on his own personal mission.
That's a far
to try to get peace with England. Hitler made a lot of speeches during the Sitzkrieg and even after that, that he saw Britain as a fellow Aryan nation, which of course, when you see the number of blondes in England, okay, you get it. It makes sense.
Sure.
It's not Sweden, but there's a lot of blondes.
Could be close.
And the Vikings were there for a long time. So
right.
To Hitler's little tortured mind about Aryans,
there was some truth of it.
to him it was true.
Yeah.
And he made a lot of speeches that he just didn't see why they should spend blood and treasure fighting each other when at their core they were both the same people, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
right,
Well,
whatever.
Rudy there, I guess, believed every bit of it. So he flies over to try to talk them into peace. They clap him in a prison. He dies in 1998? He was the only person in Spandau prison in Berlin for all 30 years.
Wow.
He was the only prisoner.
Well, that must have been nice. You have the whole run of the place.
Yeah.
And you're
obviously got good medical care.
There you
lived
go.
a long time.
Right?
But anyway, that was just kind of a side note that Hitler doesn't want to invade them. Hitler doesn't want to fight them. He's like,
sure,
we've beaten you on the battlefield. Just get out of the war.
Just give in.
I don't even know that he had any terms other than the war is over. We stop fighting.
You don't have to give up any territory. You don't have to do anything with that. Just don't fight us.
Right, don't fight us. Now, I don't know, I haven't seen any of the actual documents or anything like that, but everything I've read is that Hitler wanted the peace because I think he was already looking east. In his mind, he defeated the bad guy, France.
Right.
And that was the German plan in World War I. Push with the Schlieffen Plan, knock the French out of the war, and then go fight the Russians because that's going to take a while.
Sure.
Well, Hitler's done it. He's knocked the French out of the war.
Right.
But these pesky British
Well, and
Who-
again, yeah,
are just so frustrating.
they're like little gnats.
They're stubborn, and
Yes.
you know that Winston Churchill just, oh my gosh.
Pound on the table and
Hitler
do what I
hated
asked.
smoking, so
Well,
You know,
and heck, how
he
many
would-
how many cigars would he go through in a day, Winston Churchill?
oh, who knows?
Gosh.
Winston Churchill is an interesting person, but he is literally walking around. Then, phase 2, that's when the Germans switched to bombing cities.
Oh, yeah.
They
Break the
decide
morale
we're
of
going
the
to
people.
break the morale of the British people. Well, you didn't break the morale of the couple thousand guys in the RAF.
How are you thinking you're going to break the morale of a couple of million people?
I mean, and again, one of those little things of history. Because the British are such innovators, they crack a lot of German codes.
Uh-huh.
They break the Enigma machine, which is
Mhm.
what they talk to their submarines with.
Mhm.
They break the other one, which I can't remember the name of, but it's the Luftwaffe's.
Mm-hmm.
They figure out Coventry, a fairly large British city in the center of the country, is going to be bombed. Winston Churchill has to make the decision. Do we intercept it early? Get them over the channel
Right.
and start whittling them down before they even get to Coventry? Or do we let it bomb? Because if I go after them in the channel, they're going to know we've broken their code. There's no way they could know it. And he lets them bomb Coventry. Winston Churchill, he's got some nads.
Yeah.
Because he is willing to attack France,
Right.
their navy. He's
Right.
willing to let his own city be bombed rather than give up the secret that they've broken these codes that will allow them to keep beating on the Luftwaffe until they can win.
It's not a bad strategy.
It's
But,
not
I
unless you
mean-
live in Coventry.
Right, of course. I mean, yes, that is a negative in the terms of your seeing a city be bombed. But again, you crack a few eggs to make an omelet.
And Winston Churchill understands that you can't do this without loss.
Sure.
And it was too important to him to keep that knowledge
Mm-hmm. Under his own control.
right, so that the Germans didn't know their code. Because if they found out the code was broken, they could change it.
Sure.
Then you have to start all over.
Right.
And so, Coventry is bombed, London is bombed many, many times. It's called the Blitz.
Right.
That's,
And
I mean, it's the British being, English speakers, so we have the right to destroy anybody else's language. And, it comes from Blitzkrieg, but this isn't part of Blitzkrieg.
no.
Bombing cities is nowhere near Blitzkrieg. It's bridges
This is-
and tanks
yeah.
and headquarters. They
This
don't
is
bomb
totally
cities.
different.
And the damage is extensive.
I mean, you're right.
They're using fire bombs,
Mhm.
just like they did in Spain,
Mm-hmm.
which is where they learned to do this. But again, because they switched to this, the RAF gets a breather.
Sure. They can resupply, they can re-up a lot of their individuals who have been either
Wounded,
wounded
or they
or
can train up new
right.
guys.
And here's another little tidbit of fun fact when it comes to, again, those keep calm and carry on posters.
Yep.
This is the time in which they were really becoming popular.
Well, and Queen Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth at
Right,
this point,
at this time,
is
yes.
driving an ambulance, I do believe, at
She
this point.
is. She is.
She volunteers,
Mhm.
and of course, the press made a big deal of that.
Of
But
course they had to.
it is a big moment. This is somebody most other countries would have sent to Canada,
Right.
but
And
she
then,
wasn't
yeah,
having it.
But she wanted to be a part of it. But again, those keep calm and carry on, those morale boosters, the people who are in the underground, or what we consider today, or in our country, subways.
Subway,
the
the metro
subway
in
system.
France or Germany.
They use this as almost makeshift bomb shelters. Well, in fact, not makeshift. They were
Having
bomb
gone
shelters.
down in there, oh my goodness! Sometimes you're going down and down and down and down.
Well, hey, that's the way it
And,
goes.
yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about a bomb landing on
No.
me because it's 150 feet above me through concrete and dirt.
I think I'll be okay.
They might collapse the entrance, and that would worry me a great deal.
Sure.
Because being trapped doesn't do me much good.
No.
So it makes me kind of nervous.
I'm sure.
But it was amazing to see how deep they went. It's no wonder that, the number of people you could fit into one of those stations, even if it was fairly up towards the surface.
Mhm.
If you're not out there where the fragmentation gets you, especially with an incendiary bomb,
Right.
your biggest worry there is if they drop enough bombs to start a firestorm, which does not happen
Good.
in London
Right.
or even Coventry. the Germans just don't have the planes to start up Firestorm, which we'll talk about later in the war.
Yeah, well, that'll be coming over in the Far East, so.
So, the Battle of Britain is once again Hermann Goering promising something he can't deliver, and it eats away at the Luftwaffe. They don't ever recover from the Battle of Britain.
Well, in a way, you're starting to see some of the chinks in the armor.
Yes, well, they just don't have the manpower, because these are the guys they've been teaching since the 30s as glider pilots.
Mhm.
All those sneaky things they did to get around the Versailles Treaty, they're gone.
Right.
They're in prisoner of war camps or splattered all over the English countryside.
Sure.
Or, shark food in the English Channel.
Yeah, unfortunate.
So, you can't replace that.
Right.
And yes, you can build more airplanes, and they do. I mean, they build a lot of airplanes.
But who are you going to fly?
But they just don't have that strength and that organization.
Who's going to fly them?
You
And
know-
who's going to have the expertise of what they had from World War I into World War II, or even the beginnings of World War II?
So when we go to Russia,
Right.
to the Soviet Union later in the war, it's a much thinner. I mean, they still have a great
Sure,
Air Force.
sure.
They do horrible amounts of damage, and they support their troops very well. But
But it's nothing like it has
there's
been.
no depth. It's like a football team with only 2 quarterbacks.
Mm.
Once the first one gets injured, you're living on a prayer.
Yeah.
Because if the other guy turns his ankle, well,
You're done.
that wide receiver who played in middle school gets to be the quarterback.
Oh, no, thank you. No, thank you.
But it's the same idea. There's
Sure.
just no depth
Sure.
to their manpower.
Right.
There's guys like Adolf Galland, who was, I don't remember, 211 kills.
Oh my
He
gosh.
just
Raked them.
was absurdly good at flying planes.
Of course. Had to have.
And he ends up being in charge of the Air Force eventually. Well, the operational in charge of the Air Force. Goering kept the job.
Of course. yeah,
How,
well,
I
he
don't
has
know,
to-
because he's already 0 for 2.
Well-
0 for 3 is coming this winter, in the winter of 1940.
Yeah. We'll talk. We'll
Yeah.
talk why. But let's switch gears here real quick, though. I
Yeah.
do want to show a little bit of understanding
and
of
that's,
what's
but that's
going
over
on.
by what, October?
It is. It is
I
over
mean-
by October because, again, the British are starting to continue to push them back. They are reinforcing a lot of their troops, and they are moving into more of an offensive rather than defensive.
Yeah, the Battle of Britain kind of peters out, and eventually they just call a halt to the bombing effort.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't pick up again until 1944, when they develop the V1s and the V2s.
And by then, it's pretty much
Well,
done by for the most part.
Yeah, well, neither one of those are really accurate enough to bomb anything but a city.
Right.
You're not going to go, I'm going to take out this train station. No, you're not.
You're going to take out maybe
Unless you get lucky. You might
gonna
get that
take-
one over there.
Yeah. So again, when we do mention what's going on elsewhere, the next group that we're going to talk about here is, of course, North Africa.
Yeah.
And what do we see here in North Africa? I know it's a little difficult to read. It's a little hard to see.
Just think of this as sand.
Yeah. Well, pretty much that's it. Again, we're talking Egypt and Libya.
Here's the Nile over here.
Yeah.
There's the border right in the middle.
But the thing is, well, Libya is already conquered by the Italians,
Yeah,
correct?
they got them quite a ways back.
Mhm.
Well, or did they officially get them at the end of World War II? One, sorry.
I think it was officially at the end of World War I.
But I think they were there first.
But they had already invaded
Yeah.
fairly quickly in that time frame.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And then, of course, they took Ethiopia, which is down here.
yes. So when we look here at this idea of the African invasion force, of course, Mussolini, being the El Duce, the Duke, he wants this connector piece.
Yes.
From Libya over to Ethiopia. Well, unfortunately, there's a big elephant in the room, and it is British Egypt.
And more particularly Suez Canal.
Yes.
One of the it's almost a catechism for anybody who's going to study the British Empire. Anything that messes with going to India is something that must be stomped on with both feet
Right.
and maybe a hammer.
Uh-huh.
And so going after the Suez Canal here, which gives you a much shorter route to India.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the Italians aren't dumb.
Right.
On the upper level, they're not dumb, and on the lower level, their troops are good. They're fairly well equipped.
Mhm.
I mean, Mussolini, he really held to his promise of building a modern army.
Yeah.
They have a medium bomber that's one of the best ones in the war. They just, of course, didn't build a lot of them because
They're
smaller.
Italy.
They're
so-
Italy. A much smaller nation, much smaller industrial base. But, so when the British Army gets its butt kicked in Belgium,
Right.
and Italy joins the war
Mhm.
and invades France, it also looks here, it's like, well, if the British are about out of the war, we better hurry and invade Egypt, so that way we get a chunk of it at the peace talks.
Well, unfortunately,
Well, peace talks don't come.
no. But again, the again, like we just mentioned, the likelihood of Egypt and the British giving up the Suez Canal is a no-go.
Right,
Is
they're going to
no
fight
go.
with everything they've got for two reasons. One, it's the Suez Canal.
Right.
Two, this fits right into Winston Churchill's belief that they're going to fight Hitler just like the British fought Napoleon.
Right.
They're going to nibble around the edges and keep him busy until they can develop a coalition big enough to destroy him.
Well, and that's really what happens.
Spoiler alert!
But again, that's what's going on here. You've got, again, these British troops nibbling away here at these Italian and Germans who are coming into Libya, or from Libya, over into the western portion of Egypt. And, well,
And there's not, I mean, this part down here does not matter.
no.
This
no,
down
no,
here
no.
is nothing. The only thing that matters is the strip along the coast,
Yeah.
which really never gets outside of the range of a battleship, which is an important fact to remember.
Well, sure.
When you're trying to supply an army pushing along this road, well, of course, it's hard to outflank. If you try to go out into the desert,
You're going to die.
well, it's hard to carry enough water
yeah.
for an army.
Yeah.
That's a lot of trucks, and the trucks don't do well in the desert.
No, they do not. It's very
They need the roads.
squishy.
They need the rocks up along the coast, the
Yeah.
rocky terrain.
Right.
But the rocky terrain is easier to defend. So the Italians run in, and they're brave. They got decent equipment, but their officer corps is pasta. Overcooked pasta.
Oh,
It
boy.
is just bleh. Because Mussolini has been in charge for almost 20 years.
That's right.
That means every officer in the Italian army is a fascist,
Uh-huh.
whether he believes it or not, and party loyalty is more important, and less so in Italy than anywhere else, but you couldn't belong to another political party and be
Sure.
there. But we see this at the end of the war with the Germans, and we see it with the Russians at the beginning of the war.
Right.
The professional soldiers aren't present.
No.
The ones that can really fight. Well, we see at the beginning of the Civil War with the United States.
True.
We got the guys who graduated last.
Yeah, we did. We did.
Well, the North did.
I'm sorry,
If
yeah,
you're really
you're
being
right.
particular.
Right, right.
I'm a Yankee all the way through. So, a Jayhawker even.
Ooh.
But so you have these troops that are pretty good at fighting,
Mhm.
but not being guided very well.
No.
And so the British fall back, but not very far, and all of a sudden they're pushing into Libya,
Right.
which means the Germans have to bail them out.
Again.
Which, by the way, this is going to become a standard.
And the same. And on a brief side note, we see this happening also in Greece
Yes.
and Albania and into.
Well, they take Albania fairly well, but then
yes.
when they invade Greece from Albania,
Right.
once again, but that doesn't happen until 41.
Right.
That'll be next year when
Yes.
we get to June of 41, because that's a busy spring.
Mm-hmm.
All the way up to the beginning of summer of 1941 is very busy, the whole spring. Of course, we have this going on because it's warm all the time.
Of course.
But it's not fast.
Right.
Later in the war, it starts getting fast. When
Right.
Rommel gets involved,
Yes.
and Auchinleck, who was the actual guy who developed the plan for El Alamein,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to Montgomery, who got the credit because he showed
Right.
up like a month before.
Ah, yeah.
Well, but you see Patton on the other side. When you see this movement battle
Mhm.
start happening towards the later part of the war, that's pretty awesome. But at this part, we're mostly infantry
Mm-hmm.
on both sides because the British lost most of their tanks. So there we are. It's just it doesn't do much.
Well,
So-
and again, the idea is there, that we can stop them. It's just a matter of time.
Right. The Italians get stopped. The Germans start sending some troops down. Not a lot yet.
No,
That
not
gets-
yet,
that
because
gets more important
there's
later.
yeah.
But as we come to the close of fall 1940, Because we go into winter, the Germans are not going to try to fly over the North Sea in the winter. That's not a friendly body of water for anybody. In fact, the largest amount of shipwrecks are in the North Sea, not the Bermuda Triangle. But anyway, and you have this little thing going on with the British and the Italians in the South. Otherwise, I mean, the Chinese and Japanese are fighting, but again, nobody pays attention.
Of course.
I'm sorry, Chinese.
That's just the way it is.
You're just a secondary theater in everybody's mind, especially with bombs dropping in London. Nobody's going to pay attention.
Right.
What was the guy's name? The American broadcaster who broadcast from London. What was it during the Blitz?
Oh gosh, I couldn't
Was
remember
that
what his name was.
Murrow? Edward R. Murrow?
Yeah, I believe so.
He was, yeah, I mean, that really brought this war home to America and probably did a lot on the propaganda front. Remember, propaganda is not necessarily lies.
It's just
things that help present a side. And in this case, they're presenting the resilience and the bravery of Londoners under the Blitz.
Yes.
Plus, of course, talking about the RAF. It really stirs the American imagination.
Right.
And so, as we move into 1941,
things are getting real.
Despite some resistance, people like isolationism. It's not our war. You can see that fervor, that idea that maybe we should just do like the last time and get over there and get this over with.
Right.
Because we want to go back to business as usual.
Right.
We don't like thinking about war. We want to think about skirt lines and how they go up and cool movies and cars.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we want to think of as Americans.
Not how we're going to try and win a war.
I mean, you know, the flappers just made everybody happy.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, we are coming to now a good stopping point.
Good stopping point, the winter of 1940. That's about it. It's over.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much going on.
No. We'll pick that back up in the spring of 41 and
It'll get rocking really fast.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But anyway, again, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, share it to all of your favorite social media platforms.
Yeah, that'd be great.